Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to go over the whole concept of Jason Voorhees being added to Dead by Daylight. The 10th anniversary is coming up, and every time that happens, that discussion happens, people always, say, Jason, we want Jason. Jason is probably the single most requested killer we've had in this game's history, if we account for the entire existence of Dead by Daylight. And I don't want Jason in this game, like, at all. And I want to go over why that is. I'm not like a Jason hater or anything. Now, to be fair, I've only ever seen the first Friday the 13th movie, the 1981. And I thought it was fine. It was just like, okay, it's just a slasher movie. It was like fairly entertaining. But, it was just a product of the times. And like films like that were like super, super loved. But it was whatever. So I'm already not like super crazy about the IP in general. I just thought it was like, okay. But I can respect that it's an iconic slasher figure. I mean, he is literally like... Dead by Daylight survivors in the actual code are called campers, and it's literally based off of Camp Crystal Lake. Like, Jason did legitimately like launch the entire concept of like the slasher. So I can respect him a lot for that. So the reason I don't want him in Dead by Daylight is he's just not interesting. He doesn't do anything that would be interesting converted to gameplay. And that's the main thing I focus on when discussing, what do you want to be added to Dead by Daylight? And whenever people ask me, like, what license do I want to see? I don't really care about the license as long as the gameplay is fun. And I don't think you could make Jason interesting in any way. I think he would work in like 2016 Dead by Daylight, where it's really very simple. And it's just, man with machete is actually a viable thing that could potentially work. The problem is Trapper is basically, he's a stand-in for Jason already. They have gone on record saying that Trapper is basically just Temu Jason with bear traps. So he kind of already exists in that form. And again, I did a bunch of research on what Jason actually does in the movies. Again, he doesn't really do anything. He doesn't have like any powers. He's just undead, unstoppable. So his power is having enduring and brutal strength or something. Like, what would he physically do in the game? You can't just be a killer that runs around and just M1s people with a machete, because that would be fucking terrible. He would be dog shit and no one would ever play him. And obviously if you had Jason in the game and make him weak, people are going to be very upset. So what do you have to do? You have to start kind of stretching thematically what would work. And now Friday the 13th, the game kind of did that a little bit, because in that game, you could sort of like disapparate as Jason and then reappear in other areas as long as one of the campers like was not looking in that spot. Now, obviously, Jason has never been, at least from what I can tell, from what I've seen, he's never been shown to literally teleport like Nurse or something like that. He can't physically teleport, but what that was doing in that game was sort of mimicking how he could be, he could be right in someone's face and then they'll run away down the hill and something, but then he's somehow right there as well. It's basically trying to mimic the slasher vibes of like, the old horror movies and stuff like that. And you know what? That's kind of cool. I think that's fine. Just because he doesn't literally turn into smoke and, teleport to other places doesn't mean you can't kind of mimic what he does in the movies, and that's fine. And so in terms of like translating that to DBD, giving him a power and stuff like that, that would work. Having something like that to give a killer that just, has whatever chase, giving him very good mobility would work. The problem is if you copied that, you would just be straight up copying Friday the 13th, the game, and people would make fun of behavior for doing it. So I don't think they can do that. They can't do that because it would just be straight up ripping off the mechanic from another game. And it would be so blatant that I think behavior would get insane amounts of shit for it. You guys just made something that already exists. So I think they're kind of pigeonholed here to where they can't do that. So again, I sat there and just read the basic descriptions of like every movies, and like I read Wikipedias on what he does and stuff. And really his only thing is that he's just a relentless pursuer. That's it. That's the only thing he does. He's sort of like Myers in that sense, but at least Myers has like the stalking mechanic. But you know what? I'd even argue current day Myers is thematically fucking terrible. It's not at all good. It's not at all what Myers does in any of the movies other than the actual stalking. It's just not very good. So unless they want to completely thematically butcher the killer, I don't see a way to add him to the game and have him not be just terrible. Like that's the problem. Either you butcher him thematically and make him actually a fun, engaging character that has mechanics that work for this game, or you stay true to how he is and he's just man with machete and is F tier. I think there's no other way to do it. That's why I don't want Jason, because he's going to be disappointing people no matter what. Either thematically he's bad or mechanically he's bad. I don't see a way to combine those two. I would be so impressed if they somehow came up with a way to like change that or something like that. Because like you could make it like, oh yeah, he can walk through breakable walls because he's, just a menacing, unstoppable force. But It's not a power. That's like that's a perk. Like it's just you know what I mean. Like so that's why I think it's hard. And when you try to compare it to something like thematically he fits, but then people recently have been bringing up this discussion again for whatever reason, like Darth Vader, for example, thematically compared to Jason. Jason wins thematically in Dead by Daylight times infinity. Jason is so much more in line with actually fitting in this game's world and the vibes and the slasher vibes that it actually has. And yet I would choose Darth Vader over Jason every single time because Darth Vader actually would have interesting mechanics and interesting powers. And, you can do force pulls and pushes and fucking lightsaber stuff. Like there's plenty of things you can do with that to have engaging gameplay. I just don't see how that's possible with Jason, and that's why I don't want him. So it really comes down to the whole discussion between theming and gameplay. And the problem is, I think the community is very split on this. A lot of the times, I think the casual player just wants to see their license in the game. They don't necessarily care if it's terrible and no one ever ends up playing it again. They just go, haha, Demogorgon in game, yay! And that's it. Despite the fact you see Demogorgon like 1 out of every fucking 40 games now. So it's just like, there's always been this ongoing debate in the community of what is more important, the gameplay or the actual theming of what comes to the game. And unfortunately, I don't really think there's like a right or wrong answer there. It's really just what you kind of prefer. To me, when I'm playing a video game, like if I'm watching a movie, obviously the theming is all that matters. I'm not interacting with anything, so the theming is the only thing that matters. But if I'm playing a video game and I'm controlling the buttons that I press and everyone else that I'm going against is controlling the buttons that they press, I think theming falls like in second place. I don't think it's as important. I've always felt that online games, it's extremely hard to like maintain horror vibes because at the end of the day, you know what you're going against. You're going against another human being sitting in his, in his PJs across the world, just, doing something. He's just playing a video game with you. That's why I think it's like impossible to make a horror online video game because it just stops being scary when you realize you know the force you're going against. The unknown is what makes these things scary. But if you know you're going against a human player that's just controlling things and you can just teabag him and he'll like nodders at you, it's just not really that scary anymore. So that's why when I think when it comes to Dead by Daylight, theming should actually fall secondhand to actual balance and gameplay and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying it should be ignored entirely. I'm not saying make this game into fucking Fortnite or anything like that. I'm just saying I think they should always prioritize gameplay first over the actual theme. And for that reason, that's why I think Jason doesn't really work. Again, it leads to these discussions where then we start bringing up things like Darth Vader and everyone's like, well, that doesn't work. He's not his horror icon. It's like, whatever, man. He'd be fun, though. I've always said, this is a quote I have, I would happily play like an untextured checker box like Gary's Mod error sign or a cube or something, as long as the gameplay was fun for both sides. Again, I would make fun of how stupid it is, but I would still enjoy it and have fun, rather than if we had Jason come in and he's just man with a machete and doesn't do anything. So that's my whole take on it. Again, this is a subjective take. There's nothing I'm saying is an objective truth or anything. That's just always how I viewed online games and Dead by Daylight in general. But that's why I don't want Jason in DBD. It's a matter of theming versus gameplay. But that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.